Hey YouTube, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today I have my full review of the WE 604. Now this is one a number of you have asked me about. I've had this for quite some time and do really enjoy it. I'm gonna go out there and say this right at the beginning. I honestly feel like this is sort of the pinnacle of WE's design efforts up to this point. Not saying they won't do anything better, but I do think, you know, in terms of just a well-designed knife that really flows, it has a perfect amount of, you know, detail and is simple enough. And, you know, I just think everything kind of comes together really nicely on this particular model from WE. While I'm talking about WE knife models, let me just say this. If you're familiar with the company at all, you understand that there's a bunch of different variants of this guy. So there's different handle colors, different blade finishes, that kind of thing, even a different blade shape. So while I'm talking about this particular one, it may be worth your time to go and check out what else they have going on so that you can, you know, you can sort of see that there's a black blade and there's a pink handle and different hardware colors and all that kind of thing, just to give you a sense for the variation that's out there. While I'm talking about that, let me add that I do think the Tanto blade is the most fitting blade for this knife. I just find the drop point doesn't seem to connect with the overall knife as well as the Tanto does. So that's the last point I have on sort of introduction here. Let's go ahead and get into some of the specific things like size, weight, blade, all that good stuff. So beginning with that, the size on this knife is 8 3/4 inches overall, and it's actually just a teeny bit bigger. So you could really call it 8 15/16. Or I'm sorry, 13/16. As well, the blade is 3 3/4 inches, so almost 4 inches, and it's just a 1/16 of an inch larger as well. So really, you know, the true measurement on this blade is going to be 3 15/16. Why do I keep saying that? 3 13/16. Okay. Handle is 5 inches overall, or I mean 5 inches total. And the weight is 4.2 ounces, which is actually really good for, you know, consider that this is a fairly large knife at over 8 3/4 inches. It's a titanium frame lock with a fairly full closed in back, which normally adds quite a bit of weight. So to get this down to 4.2 ounces is pretty impressive as far as I'm concerned. And that does make it carry very comfortably. I mean, you can see it's a pretty slim knife overall. You know, around 1/2 inch thick, but I mean slim in this dimension. So yeah, carrying this is very comfortable. It's not a knife that takes up a lot of space or is very intrusive in pocket at all. So let's go ahead now and talk about this blade. This of course is the Tanto blade. It's DLC on the flats and a very high satin on the bevels, which is absolutely gorgeous. Like, it's almost mirror, but it's just satin enough that you can see some nice grind lines there. Really attractive blade. One of my favorite in my whole collection in terms of just how well done this blade is. Really nice. You've got this very abrupt grind here at the tip. It's not a zero grind, but it is very steep. So you can see that here if I tip the knife this way. This is fairly abrupt there. Which means it doesn't have great edge geometry out here at the tip, but otherwise it actually does have rather nice, sometimes you can see stuff in the office here, that blade is so polished. But otherwise it's actually pretty good edge geometry. S35VN blade steel, of course it's a Tanto blade, and I'm going to call this an American Tanto. Now sometimes it's maybe a little more swept back than a typical American Tanto, maybe from Cold Steel or something. But as far as I'm concerned, a true Japanese Tanto is like a traditional, like it's way swept back. So it would be like something like that, like the Otonashi no Ken. This then is maybe a modified American Tanto, but I wouldn't call it a Japanese Tanto at all. So that's the blade. It is nice and thin behind the edge. I wanted to just add this point. 25 thousandths behind the edge, which is really nice and thin. You know, that's thinner than the Riots we were talking about the other day. It's thinner than, let's say, a Para 2 or even a military. So that's a pretty nice edge geometry. The only drawback is because of the grind, it's a fairly abrupt climb. So you can see there's not a lot of distance here. So this is not a great slicer, and it's especially not a great slicer out of the tip, unless you're just cutting with that very tip. You know, maybe you're opening up a package and you've just got the very tip of the blade in. That's fine. So it's not an amazing slicer. It's certainly capable. And the edge geometry is really good. It's just more about the way the bevel is fairly you know, fairly shallow here. So, you know, you've only got this much distance to get to the full width of the knife. So rather than being nice and thin like this, it's more open like that. All right, plunge grind is really, really well done. And really overall, this blade is, you know, in terms of quality, in terms of the grinds, the straightness of it, the evenness of it, everything is really, really nice, okay? Now let me finally conclude here that this blade does sacrifice a little bit of function for form, especially with the grind there at the tip. It looks amazing and I wouldn't change a thing about it, but that very, very abrupt grind does mean the tip is not going to cut super, super well. All right. For your average EDC tasks, opening boxes, packages, stuff like that, it's going to be fine. Tantos are not amazing for food prep anyway, and that would be really the area where this blade would suffer a little, but as I say, you know, I'm really never going to be doing food prep with this knife, and I wouldn't, probably most people buying it wouldn't either. Let's go ahead now and talk about lockup and deployment. Like most WE knives, this is a titanium frame lock, stainless steel lock bar insert that you can see right there, ceramic bearings, you can see the proprietary pivot screw there, so you can adjust the tension on this pivot. The lock bar is nice and easy to access. The flipper tab, I don't hate the flipper tab, but I will say it does not push button at all. You have to light switch this knife, so it probably doesn't matter to most people, but I'm sure there's probably some collector somewhere out there who says, no, I only like knives that can push button. And if that's you, then you probably want to avoid this because this does not push button. It just, like, it doesn't do it well. Okay, it's definitely designed to light switch, and the jimping is certainly set up for that. In terms of the action, in terms of the, you know, the detent and the smoothness of the bearings and all of that, it's good, but not amazing, okay? I think you probably recall that when I did my review on the WE 615, I talked about how wonderful that knife was, and it really, you know, everything about that is really well done. The detent is set perfectly, it's smooth as silk when it's deploying. This, I can't go to that, you know, level of high praise. It is very, very smooth. It's certainly fast. The detent is more than adequate in terms of it being strong enough. So it's not that I'm complaining about it, but it's not just something that's totally, totally amazing. I will say, you can see I've got some fingerprints on there. Let me see if I can clean that off a little for you. It is a very fingerprinty blade, okay, for sure. If you're touching this and your hands are sweaty or oily in the least, you're definitely going to leave fingerprints on that nearly mirror polished blade there. Let's get back to action though. The lock bar is easy to actuate. The tension is set pretty nicely. You can see it's a reasonably thick relief cut, which I do appreciate. Detent, as I say, is good, but not amazing. Certainly it works every time, so I have no issue with that whatsoever, but it doesn't feel as refined as maybe some of the WE knives that I've had, okay? So functional, yes, you know, this super high-end feeling of perfection, no. Overall, I think the action, the lockup is very good. It's certainly rock solid. There's no blade play in any direction, which at this price point you'd never expect. You know, it functions as it should, and it is enjoyable. This is a knife that I will sit around and flip open from time to time. It's definitely nice enough for that, and certainly nicer than, you know, a lot of things that are out there. Let's go ahead and talk about the handle now. The handle is one of the really cool features of this knife. You can see those dragon scales, and I've talked about this before, and I still kind of want to refinish this knife in some way. The problem is I just can't decide exactly what I want to do with it, and it looks so good now that I'm kind of afraid to mess it up. That, you know, I would do something that I think would look really cool, and then I'm sort of like, it turns out I didn't like it. So I'm a little hesitant to do that, even though I do think this would look awesome with the right anodization, with the right finishes on it. The construction here is pretty interesting. So the way this is designed is you've got two halves here milled out and then screwed together, and they do lock together very, very solidly. So it acts almost like an integral knife, like it's really, really solid, which is rather enjoyable and does, you know, make a bit of a statement about the quality that WE is able to achieve on this. Like, it's, you know, if you look there, you almost can't see the line at all. Lanyard hole is integrated into the handle really, really nicely. Milled titanium clip that you can see here works pretty well. It's a little bit narrow for, I don't know, say 5'11" pants with the reinforced pockets or something, that can be a little tough to get into pocket, but that's about the only time you're going to have an issue. You can see that nice little milling on the lock bar, which does give you a nice, easy way to get a hold of it. In terms of construction, I'm very impressed, and in terms of design, I am also very impressed. One cool thing is, if you look at this, the only screw here is the screw that goes into the pocket clip. So it really makes you think the knife could almost be integral. Like, you just look at it and go, I don't get it. How are they holding this thing up together? And it's just this one screw. Pretty neat. Of course, the pivot screw as well is doing its job. So that's the handle, and I've got to say, I guess I should speak to ergonomics, which is, there's not a lot to say. This is essentially a long, sort of rounded handle, and so of course it's very, very comfortable. It's often been said that the closer you get to sort of a broomstick, the more comfortable it is, and you can see this is just straight and round, and it's got great grip because of those scales. So yeah, ergonomics is fantastic on this knife. In any way you hold it, it works really well. As well, if you were in a situation where you really needed to hold on to this firmly, it does have a nice positive, very confidence-inspiring grip to it. So all of that is very, very good. Let's now finally get some comparisons in here. I know everyone loves the comparisons, so let's pull in some stuff that you may want to look at if you're looking at this guy. Here we have the Kaiser Gemini. This is from the Bladesmith series. Now, it's in terms of design, the WE has a lot more going on, but Kaiser is a Chinese-made high-end titanium frame lock, and so in that sense, they're very comparable. WE is starting to make some changes. Kaiser is starting to make some changes, I think, in response to what WE Knives is doing and adding a little more detail and pivot collars and some designs that are maybe a little more out there. I don't know if I love that direction totally, but I get it, okay? What else have we got? Okay, here we go. Real Steel Megalodon, another, high-end Chinese-made knife. The action on this guy is absolutely better, okay? Beautiful, beautiful knife. And these are very similar in terms of size and slimness. You can see they're both very slim profiles. They both carry really, really nicely. The blade on the Megalodon is going to be a little more practical, okay? Maybe a little more user-oriented than the blade on the 604, which I would say is a little more design-oriented. It's made to look really awesome, more so than function, really well. Although it functions fine, but it's just they have gone with, this is a design choice rather than a function choice. Curtis F3, a little bit bigger here. Of course, much more expensive and in a kind of a different category, but I wanted to throw in a couple of USA-made knives. Now, probably a little more similar from just a use standpoint, certainly not from a price standpoint, and certainly not from a, what would you say? There are a lot of differences between these two knives, but they are both very slim, light. They're kind of long, lean knives. Both are, designs that I find extremely compelling. Of course, the Olamic is going to cost you a fair bit more, and this is an Olamic swish. I just realized I hadn't said that up to this point, but both great designs. And I think that what I will say is this: I think the swish probably does a little better tying together function and form. So this is a gorgeous looking knife, as gorgeous as this one, although it's going to be a little more versatile in terms of use. Let's pull in another knife here that really is about form over function, and that is the ZT0055. Okay, so the 0055 is a knife that it comes from a GTC design, which is why I misspoke. But it's definitely a knife that's designed around a look, okay, and a feel. This is called the Airborne. It's designed to sort of take some of its styling cues from like a Jet, and certainly it does. But if you compare it to something like this, okay, you have to say, this is a more useful, more versatile knife in terms of pretty much every aspect: handle shape, blade shape, all, pretty much everything you could consider there. That said, the ZT is very reasonably priced and certainly as cool, okay? I think both of these, the thing that makes them stand out is the design is awesome, okay? they both function very well as knives. I have no issue, and I'm certainly not saying, yeah, they threw function right out the window with these two. Not at all. But these are definitely very stylized knives. Here's another pretty cool option. This is more of a mid-tech option, probably similar in price point. The reason I bring this one in is because I think this appeals to someone who likes WE knives. There's a lot of detail here. It's very decorative. There's a lot of activity going on in the design, which is usually true of Brian Ty's work. And so, yeah, if you want something that's very detail-oriented, has lots of cool stuff going on, something from Brian Ty and Friends might be appealing to you as well. This, of course, is the TIE Fighter. And most of you watching are probably familiar with that. One last knife, and it's hard not to bring this guy in when we're talking about high-end Chinese frame locks. This, of course, is the Riot Knives Torrent. Again, a great knife, and again, probably a little more, this is more of a user EDC style knife than this guy. Yes, it's beautiful in terms of its style, and it's interesting, and it's got lots of great features, but in terms of just being a good knife, and having a very safe, sort of vanilla design, I think this guy is probably closer to that. So, finally, let's make some conclusions about this WE Knives 604. I honestly think this is a great, great knife. It's comfortable in hand. It's easy to carry. It's more than an adequate performer in terms of the blade. Cuts well, nice high-end steel. I don't know if I mentioned that it is S35VN. I think I did, but just in case I forgot, that's what it is. So yeah, overall, this is just a great knife, and I really do feel like this is probably the strongest WE from a design standpoint. I really, really like what they've done here. And you know what? I'm going to give them the proprietary hardware. I know Nick gives them a hard time over that, but to me, it's not the end of the world, especially since they've added the tool. It would be nice if they would add a tool, though, that could attach into a typical 1/4-inch driver bit. Anyway, great design, absolutely gorgeous knife. One of my favorite blades in my whole collection. I find this to be one of the most attractive blades, not only in my collection, but just even out there on the marketplace, okay? So yeah, great knife, highly recommended, with the exception that, this is strongly stylized, and so that's going to put some people off. So if you don't like the design, well, definitely don't buy it. But if you think it's a cool looking knife, I don't think you'll be disappointed by, quality or performance or anything like that. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.